Welcome back to another episode of TimeOut with the Sports Doctor podcast, where life, sports, and medicine intersects. We are glad that you are part of this growing community where we strive to help you strengthen your mindset, help you grow your assets, and help you achieve whatever level of success that you want for your life. Go to our website at Dr.Derrick, thesportsdoctor.com, where you can find all the latest content, and you can also follow us on our social media channels. Now, let's get into this episode. Welcome back to another episode of Time Out with the Sports Doctor, and hopefully your week is off to a great start. We're continuing our countdown to our anniversary this week, and this week we're going all the way back to 2021. This episode was actually recorded the week prior to the podcast launching. So today we're going to feature the episode that I did with Dr. Eric Peters. When I went back and looked at it, it was gratifying to see some of the mistakes that were made, the lighting, just how far we've come in 3 years. At that point, I was doing everything on my own. I was getting all the guests. I was producing every episode, releasing every episode. I'm happy to say now I don't have all those responsibilities on my shoulder at all times, but it's just an appreciation of where we come from. However, we continue to stick to the same basic principles. So we're going to listen to this episode. As I mentioned, in the intro last week, a lot of the things that we discussed have come to fruition already. And I really want to credit Dr. Peters with one thing. He challenged me with the reading competition, not necessarily a competition, but a challenge that he made for himself back in like 2020 or 2021, when he had made it his promise that he was going to read 36 books in a year. And now I know he's increased that number. But that was a daunting task for me at that time. However, it inspired me. And that's when I really started doing a lot of Audible books, also doing some reading, but really Audibles became my thing, being able to get through information quickly, especially during downtime. So that was one thing that will stand out. He definitely talks about that in the episode, as well as we talk about just life and investing and growing up together. So it's very important. They say if you look around to the 5 people that you communicate with most, you'll know your future and you'll kind of know more about yourself. He's definitely in that inner circle for me. I mean, he's been there for over 20, almost 25 years now. So hopefully you enjoy this episode and be on the lookout. We're going to be asking you for your input and your feedback about the podcast. I mean, the impact that it's made for you over the last 3 years. Have a great week. Dr. Peters, welcome to the show.
Thank you, man. Thank you for having me.
Man, glad to have you. I know you're a busy man. I can tell you had a long day.
Yeah, every day is a long day, man.
I hear you. Well, all right, man. Well, let's just go ahead and get into it. So, Dr. Peters, I don't call you Dr. Peters. It's probably the last time I'll be able to do that because, you've been E for 20 years now. So,
Yeah.
But yeah, man. So tell me about, I started this platform because really when we meet successful people, like yourself, it's very hard to identify with you as a person, right? Because I can see the success, I can see the businesses, and you're distracted by that. A lot of times it's hard for someone to really understand what you went through to get there. So on my show, I like to go through the backstory so people can really identify with you as a person, not just you as a businessman, entrepreneur, whatever it may be. So, man, let's start off with, born and raised New Orleans, Louisiana. How was it growing up in the 90s in New Orleans, as a young kid?
I mean, growing up, I could even go back to even, thinking about the 80s growing up, man, as an even younger kid. The hood was the hood, man. At the time, we didn't even realize it was tough. It's all we knew, right? We thought that was normal, the things that we were going through and the adversities that we faced, things we had to overcome, our day-to-day challenges, we thought were the challenges of the world.
Right.
Not realizing that, those challenges was actually localized to inner city, more poverty-stricken areas. But growing up, man, it was a good childhood. I was the youngest of 6 kids. And out those 6 kids, I was the first of the 6 to actually graduate with a college degree. I come from a household where my mom finished high school. My dad, furthest he went is 11th grade. And they both basically went straight into the workforce. College wasn't a big thing at the time for, people coming out of that generation or that era, unless you were fortunate financially enough to be able to afford to go to college. So growing up, we figured out at a very young age that I was a little bit advanced when it came to subjects like math and science than other kids that were of equal age. And I had a particular teacher that took a notice to that and brought it to my parents' attention and wanted to explore it a little bit more. So we did some testing and we did some different programming for me and about 4 other kids in school that they all felt were similar in stature as far as like our education at that point. And it's so crazy because ironically, I want to say like out the kids, like 4 out of the 5 were left-handed by pure chance, right? But it was just kind of cool learning more about the brain and how things work and thinking about the arithmetic and the side of the brain that you think of and so forth and so on. And later on, kind of piecing it together to figure out that, those people are typically a little bit advanced in those areas because of that side of the brain. But yeah, man, just growing up, it was good. It was good. Play sports, constantly tried to stay active, try to stay out of as much trouble as I could. But, trouble has always found kids of the inner cities, of course, especially during those times, trouble was normal to us. We just tried to make sure we didn't do too much trouble that would cause too much damage. But other than that, man, that's pretty much the childhood, just kind of normal childhood living as a inner city kid,
Yeah, so like you said, first, I thought you were the first, but first to graduate high school and go on to college. Like you said, growing up inner city during that time, I remember Master P days. New Orleans was murder capital of the world, right? So plenty of trouble to get into. But like you said, identified early in life as a, high achiever. Did your family or did the people, friends, did they treat you any differently? Did they say, don't mess with E, he's a good student, that type thing? Or what was that experience like?
Not really, man. I still was a little, knucklehead in so many ways. But at the same time, my brothers, my older siblings basically tried to keep me out of trouble and tried to keep me out of making the same mistakes that they made. But for the most part, I wouldn't say that nobody treated me any differently or so forth, so on, Pretty normal kid, like I said, just growing up, loving the sport of baseball, trying to do the best that I can to get better at it. And typical kid growing up in the city, man.
Right. So now, like you said, love for baseball, now having Carter and seeing his love for baseball, how is that for you as a father?
Oh, man. So every year I tell myself, I am not going to coach again.
Right.
I'm done coaching, right? And then every year I get suckered right back into it because I just love being in the park. I love working with the kids. I love watching their development. Even this year, the first day when we went to tryouts, they were begging parents to assist with coaching. And I was just like, well, I guess I could do it. And my ex-wife was like, don't you say you wasn't coaching more? Like, you do this to yourself. I'm like, do you even have the time?
Yeah.
And I'm like, to be honest with you, I don't, but I guess I'll have to figure it out.
Right. So that was my first coaching experience too. Soccer last year. So, I've never played soccer in my life, but of course, when you register, you always get that call. Hey, we need coaches really bad. We don't have coaches.
Mm-hmm.
So my wife committed us to coaching soccer. Never kicked a soccer ball before, but like you said, you do what you got to do for the kids.
Definitely, man. But I've always also vowed to never commit to something that I felt like I couldn't give the kids the best chance to achieve. That only sports that I would even possibly consider would be baseball and maybe basketball, but not even so much with basketball because I know I had so many things fundamentally wrong with my game where it's like my speed kept me competitive and, I would break somebody's ankles with the ball. But at the same time, the way that I formed my jump shot and so forth, so on, wasn't the most fundamental way of shooting the ball. So I wouldn't even try to teach somebody else's kid.
Right.
So baseball is kind of like the only thing that I actually would honestly consider assisting and coaching. And I take a backseat.
Right.
I do what I can. I put in my input when I can, but I'm more of a, okay, coach, this is what we're doing. All right, let's run these drills. And I'm going to run a drill to the T, but I'm going to let coach, pretty much direct what drills we're going to run. So I'll take a backseat and make sure that I'm just trying to help the kids to progress as best as possible.
Right. And at the end of the day, that's really what it's about. So, man, let's jump to Xavier. That's where we met. How did you choose first to stay in the city and go to Xavier University of Louisiana, that is?
I mean, my first choice was LSU, right? Growing up as a kid in the city of New Orleans, you grow up loving LSU. It's like a love around the state, I guess you can say. And I was accepted into LSU and had my roommate in the dorm, picked the whole nine, was pretty much set to go. And then a church member of my mom, who's still at Xavier to this day, came to my mom, and she's over the financial aid office, but she came to my mom and was basically like, your son wants to be a pharmacist. He really needs to be at Xavier. And my mom was like, well, he's going to do his first 2 years at LSU, then transfer. She was like, okay, well, it's not that easy to transfer, externally. And he would have a much better opportunity of excelling in that field if he went to Xavier for undergrad. She was like, trust me on this. So since she's so well respected around Xavier, and this is Dr. Woods, by the way, but since he's so well respected around Xavier, my mom kind of came to me and was like, hey, I know you have your heart set on LSU, X, Y, and Z, but we thinking you should go to Xavier. You got accepted into Xavier as well. Why not Xavier? And I was like, yeah, I got accepted into, everywhere that I'd applied. So it kind of came down to my choice. And I was just like, okay, maybe I'll consider X, Y, and Z. And then she came to me and was like, okay, well, what if I bought you a brand new car? Now, mind you, the car I had I didn't need a new car, basically. So I was like, oh, a new car. Okay. Maybe we could talk about it, etc. And I was like, well, I have a car. What about if I got my own apartment, And she was basically like, okay, if that's what's going to persuade you to stay home, we'll get you an apartment. So here I am as Xavier freshman with, a car that I got in the high school and a brand new apartment. So I felt like I was winning, man. And I got to Xavier first semester, and I'm running behind every young lady that I can try to run behind at the time, and ended up with, I think, a 2.5 GPA, which was the first in my life that I've ever had something that low. So I buckled down after that and bounced back the next semester. I think I had a 3.79. I think I made a B in like my lab, but kind of like basically that's what started it. Like my immediate, and it wasn't failure, right? Because a 2.5 is not failure, but at the same time, to my standards, it was. So I kind of buckled down and got on my P's and Q's and took it seriously. And, by the time we got to second year, which is kind of like when we really, really start hanging, I buckled down on chemistry and in my math classes. And not only was I excelling, but I was helping others to excel in the classes as well. And I took pride in making all A's. I took pride in ace in organic chemistry. It's like those things actually made me feel like I was spending my parents' money well.
Right.
So I just kind of kept up with it, man, probably all the way up until the point when I pledged. I was doing pretty good. And when I pledged,
hold on, don't go to fall 2000 just yet. Don't go to fall 2000.
That semester was what it was.
Since you brought it up, all right, so my initial impression of Eric, right? So it was a Nissan?
No, I had a Mazda 626.
Mazda 626 with blue lights on the car.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, I'm staying in the dorm. I'm on the poor side. I'm staying in St. Michael's dorm. Right across the street is KD. That's where Eric was putting in work, right? So we see this little black car with blue lights. He's got these blue lights on the front of his car, and it's making its rounds through campus. And I'm like, man, who is this dude? We're trying to put in our work, and he coming through, sweeping them up, in his car, his fancy car, and doing his thing. So that was my initial impression, right? So then, like you said, sophomore year, organic chemistry. So organic chemistry at Xavier University is probably a weed out course, right? So we go to class, and then you have these study sessions. And, Ashtay Collins, he was one of the main leaders, boy genius for sure. And that's when we met. We met in studying for organic chemistry. So, and like you said, you were one of the people who were breaking it down on the board, going through all the formulas. I was struggling just trying to keep my head above water at that point. But yeah, so the black car with the blue lights, I'll never forget that.
That was crazy times for sure. But at the same time, man, stuff like organic chemistry created so many bonds with people that lifetime bonds that I probably would have never had before. Just this past week, I heard from Neil. I talked to Neil and kind of chopped it up with him. Talked to, John Dawkins came and stayed with me this past weekend. Things like that, people that I met in that organic chemistry class that are now, doctors in their respective fields that are making waves and moves, people that I probably had no communications with prior to getting in that course. And we kind of getting a group of people together and doing like extra study sessions and pretty much competing in so many ways. We really was trying to get out the class, but at the same time, we were also trying to do the best that we could,
right.
So almost like competing against yourself, right? But created these support groups to the point that it became family. And still to the day, those people are like family to me, man. And I owe so much to the university and the people that I met along the way at Xavier, because it's much more than my classmates.
So that's the crazy thing about Xavier, right? So hanging out in the library was a cool place to be. Like you said, competing in organic chemistry was a cool thing to do. Nobody cared about being a nerd. Nobody cared about being called out. We were all there for a singular purpose. And, you were just trying to do what you could. But at the same time, you wasn't cutting people, stabbing people in the back. You were trying to bring people along with you. What was your experience like?
Man, so I'll tell everybody to this day, I made being a nerd cool.
Right.
In my personal opinion, right? Like, it wasn't about being a nerd or doing well in the class. I took it and I used it to my advantage, right? So I used to find the cutest girls in class that wasn't doing too good and be like, man, I could get you out this class, right? But no, man. So I really, to this day, I still tell people, like, if they ask about me and they like, describe yourself to me, I tell them, well, in my personal opinion, I'm a nerd. I've always been a nerd and probably always will be, but I'm still a cool guy. Like, I'm still down to earth, real chill, but at the same time, I love to learn. I'm a student of life. I'm always trying to take on as much knowledge as I can. Like, this particular year, as busy as I am, I challenged myself to 36 books. Last year, I challenged myself to 30. And I completed 30. So this year I'm challenging myself to 36. Here we are, we rounding the end of the halfway mark. And I think I'm 2 books behind schedule. So that's what, last weekend I buckled down and I read all weekend, right? Because I'm going to finish my 36 books, but it's not just reading. I don't do a whole bunch of fiction. I throw in some fiction every now and then. It's kind of like dessert, right? You don't want to just eat and not ever get dessert. So I get a little fiction in at times, but majority of it is self-help, creating the better versions of myself type thing is my goal. Like, every day I try to be better than I was yesterday, right? And that's mentally, physically, emotionally, financially, spiritually. I'm trying to put in work on myself. And what happens is it ultimately created this level of happiness, right? To where I'm just happy with myself. I'm happy with who I am. I feel like I'm fulfilling my purpose. Because I didn't just take my degree and said, okay, you have this doctor of pharmacy degree, you're a pharmacist. Cool, go to work. No. I took it and I tried to see how I can make the best of it and use it to the most of my ability. And I tell people, especially my nephews and nieces, I tell them that all the time. I don't care what it is you do, right? Just be the best at it. Right. I don't care if you want to start a lawn care service, then be the best lawn care service there is out there. I don't care if you want to be whatever it is you want to do, be the best at it. If you want to be a trainer in a gym, like, be the best trainer there is, for people, seeking you out for your service. And that comes with hard work and dedication, right? I'd always stop and give glory and honor to the person that made it all possible, because everything that we have and everything that we acquire can be taken away, right? Which lets us know it's not ours. We're just stewardess of God's things. So also always stop and, pay your homage and be humble and give him thanks and put in the work. And at the end of the day, you will be rewarded for the energy that you put out into the universe.
Right. So, E, man, you, like you said, 36 books in 2021. Last year, about this time, beginning of COVID, we were talking one day and we were talking about reading books. And probably up to that point, the most books I ever read in a year, maybe 2 or 3. And I recall you said, man, yeah, I'll tell you what, we were on chat, Line Brothers chatting. And you said, at all times, I got an audio book, a digital book, and a paperback book that's going. I thought that was the craziest thing in the world. But that, that inspired me. I immediately came back and told Maisha, I was like, man, Eric said he's got 3 books going at all times. So, I was really at that point, from a financial standpoint, I felt like I was ignorant, and with all the things that were going on at that time in the world from a social justice standpoint, I knew I needed more knowledge in that area. So I challenged myself. And now I'm on book number 20, since that time last year. So between audiobooks, reading books, I'm on book number 20. And I wouldn't be there if you hadn't put that challenge out there. So, it's all about who you surround yourself with.
Absolutely, man. That's a blessing to hear, man, to be honest with you, because I tell people all the time, like I can make myself a millionaire like probably 100 times over, right? But at the same time, it's not about just me. I'm trying to share as much of my knowledge as I can with as many as I can so that we all can meet each other at the top, right? And I feel like a lot of my success is attributed to the amount of reading that I do. You know, I read
Absolutely.
something a long, long time ago that said, on average, most billionaires read 2 books a week,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I was like, well, shit, if I want to be a millionaire, I got to catch up. I'm behind, you know? So that's kind of like what kickstarted my reading. And yeah, you're right. So actually now I've kind of graduated. I do 4 books at a time. Because I have one in audio at all times. I have one digital at all times. Then I have 2 paperbacks that I keep on side my bed at both homes. So depending on what home I am, that's kind of like what book I work on before going to bed. So when I'm in a car, I don't listen to any music. When I'm by myself, I just listen to my audiobooks. That's when that
Right.
comes into play.
Yep.
If I have any spare time, like whether I'm reading for a restaurant for a table or if I'm eating by myself, then I'll put up my digital on my phone.
Mm-hmm.
But I can read on my phone. And that's kind of like where I get that one done. And that's probably the slowest book that I read because it's not as many opportunities there. But then every night before bed, the last thing I do is actually read, because in one of the readings that I read, which was On a Day, a book called On a Day, he talked about the worst thing you could do before going to bed is looking at some type of electronic,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's a TV, your computer, your phone, it kind of like disturbs your sleep cycle. I was like, okay, you know what? I'll try not to do that. So the last thing I do before I go to bed is I read. And I read, 30 minutes or so, whatever book is on side my bed until I finish that book. And like when I wake up in the morning, I don't go straight to my phone. I don't check social media, so forth, so on. I was really, really bad with checking my accounts and my stocks and so forth and so on. But I mean, the market doesn't open as soon as I wake anyways. I'm up sometimes 3 hours before the market actually opens. So I stopped doing that as well, to where the first thing I do in the morning is open up the windows so I can soak in some natural vitamin D, a big glass of water, and pretty much plan out getting my day started before I actually pull out like an electronic. And if I do pull out my phone, like I said, I'm going to check like my accounts or so forth, so on, far before I do anything like social media, anything like that.
Right. So I'm reading this book or listening to a book now called Thinking Big. And a quote by Zig Ziglar said that your input determines your outlook. Your outlook determines your output, and your output determines your future. And, that hit me. I was like, man, that's what it's all about, because if you're listening to music all the time, you're missing out on a lot of different, a lot of knowledge that you could be picking up. And now, like you said, in the car is a podcast, it's a sermon, it's a book, an audio book, walking around, waiting on the kids, picking them up from an activity, got my earpods in, so just trying to soak it up as much as possible.
That's it, man. Your brain is like a sponge. You can soak up as much information now. So information is just that, right? It's information, and you can soak up as much of it as you possibly can, but it doesn't equate to knowledge until you put that information into use, until you actually using it to better yourself.
Right.
So that's when it becomes knowledgeable. And I can tell you, man, I have big cousins who are super successful that, I got a text message from one of them this past week saying, hey, E, I'm running, my company X, Y, and Z. Can you possibly recommend some books for me to help me as far as like coaching my staff up? And it's almost like I've read so much at this point. Any subject you ask me, I'm probably going to have a recommendation, right? And the book leave lasting marks on me to the point that, like as soon as he said that, I was like, oh man, look into this book called Radical Candor, and look at this book called Good to Great. Right. And it's like I could just rattle off books like that at the top of my head, and I can sit down and actually have a conversation with you, even though I read those books years ago.
Right.
And still have conversations about those books. And that's when I know that I'm not just reading for the purpose of, okay, I'm just going through it to read or trying to increase your vocabulary. No. I'm trying to utilize this information and turn it into knowledge.
Absolutely. So E, let's go to Fall 99, man. So Fall 99, we're both interested in Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. And, as we express our interests, we get linked up, So, I like to describe us as oil and water. You're a big city kid. I'm a country boy. You were flashy, and I was ashy probably at that point, you would say. But core values were the same. So it's always been since day one. It was Derrick and Eric, D&E. You know, it was almost like we were inseparable from the time we first met. Describe our relationship to you.
As healthcare providers, we spend a large portion of our lives focused on our training as well as taking care of other individuals. But I'm calling a timeout because life can change in an instant. We know it's difficult to fathom that a sudden illness, injury, or death could put you and your family in a devastating financial situation. But that's where Dr. Stephanie Pearson and her unique team of advisors at Pearson Ravitz come into play. They focus on empowering physicians like yourself to protect your most valuable asset, your income, and life's most important people, your family. So go to PearsonRavitz.com to make sure that you are protected today.
That's pretty much it for me, man. Right? Like we come from different ends of the earth, but I've always had that personality that I could get along with pretty much anybody. And you exude that exact same characteristic. It's like you pretty much get along with anybody. So, and we both was very focused and determined on our career, but we also was very focused and determined to become members of the fraternity, right? Mm-hmm. So with that, we idolized with each other and said that, hey, if this is our route and this is the way we're going to go, then we're going to go and help each other the best that we can so that we both can help achieve what we're looking to achieve. Right. And at the same time, man, we're from different ends of the earth, but we both trying to run around with who we can run around with and have fun and kick it at the same time. So we had a lot of the same characteristics in our personalities, even though we come from two different worlds, seem like. But at the same time, too, you introduced me to the countryside. Right. We went out and I had jokes about, man, wouldn't think that y'all had street lights out here. And then we kind of made it like an annual thing where we went home every year for Thanksgiving and your family took me in and basically accepted me as family. And we just kind of grew closer and closer, man. So, from day one, man, I mean, all my line brothers, man, we all have different relationships, right? But we have some that I can honestly say was a little bit more revered because from the very beginning, it's like we just clicked, you know?
So, fraternities, a lot of people, I'm pretty sure there's plenty of listeners out there now that think fraternity and all they think is party. But we had 8 people on our line. Break down the careers of the 8 people on our line.
I mean, pharmacists, we have 1, 2, 3 MDs, which is orthopedic surgeon, owner of 2 urgent care clinics, and an anesthesiologist. We have a master's in public health. Actually, did he get his doctorate?
PhD.
Doctor in public health. We have a master's in business. We have
JD,
another master's in public health, and then a lawyer.
Right. So, we had plenty of fun at Xavier, but we were there to achieve. We were there to handle our business. And we didn't let somebody just slack off. We weren't going to let somebody. We prided our chapter with our GPA,
Yeah, if our grades that chapter, though, we were going to be in trouble, too.
Right.
So.
Right. So we did have a lot of fun, but we were there on business for sure. So, man, let's go to adversity. Overcoming adversity is a part of achieving success. And that's the piece that, an innocent bystander doesn't get to know the adversity that you had to overcome to become an owner of multiple pharmacies. So what do you feel? How do you feel that adversity shaped you into being the man that you are now?
I mean, all right, coming from inner city, I dealt with several different adversities. Like the very first one that I would say would be a monstrosity in my lifetime would have been the losing of my brother, my senior year of high school, which is, when I got to college, I kind of dedicated my education to him because that's what he drove. He was all about education, right? So I kind of dedicated my education to him, and I was like, no matter what, I'm going to finish.
Yeah.
Right. Like I owed it to him to finish. So that was like the first early on. But as time went along and I graduated, I felt like I was on top of the world. I'm working hard, trying to, provide for my family. At the time, I didn't have kids, but I was married at that time, and I was trying to provide. And at the same time, try to live and have a good life. Well, once my ex-wife was pregnant with our first kid, I went home one day and basically told her, I'm thinking about quitting my job and starting my own company. I've been talking to one of my closest boys, Steve, which is now my business partner. It's like, he has this idea about starting his own. I think I want to start my own as well. kind of do it all at the same time so that we can kind of like be each other's support group, piggyback off each other and kind of do it together or whatever, but we were still separate. So a lot of people thought I was plumb crazy to quit my job of, so long, making so much right when I had my first child on the way. But it was something that I needed to do. I prayed about it and I felt the conviction in my spirit and I just moved on it. And I took a leap of faith and I did it. That's when I came across my biggest adversity when it came to the business sector. Right when I felt like the little money that I had was running out and the third bank had told me no and denied me. I prayed and I felt like God didn't bring me this far to leave me. Right. So I became more compassionate with my spiritual and went to him and more of a pleading factor. And he provided. Right when I felt like I was in the darkest hour, the clouds lifted. A bank approved me. They gave me more than I asked for. Basically told me I needed more than I asked for, which I knew I did. But at the same time, they were telling me no for the numbers I was asking for. So, I definitely didn't want to ask for more. And I was financially able to go ahead and quit and finish building my store and open up my first location. And I'm telling you, man, it's a testament because I would go in there and I had prayed that I could just replace 80% of my salary and pay the young lady that left with me. And I would have been happy with that. Right. And here we are now, 6.5, almost 7 years. September makes 7 years later. And we've grown to 10 locations. I have over 70 employees. Me and my business partner, we combined those companies that we started, that we were doing all the same stuff to where now, we're 50-50 across the board on everything. We don't have any investors. It's just he and I. And life has been truly, truly a blessing, man. And it all came because, like the trials of Job, I felt like at one point everything was being taken away from me. I went through a tough divorce. I felt like I couldn't pay my bills. I felt like the business was slipping. I thought at one point I was going to have to sell it through the divorce. And I stayed steadfast and I prayed more and I buckled down hard and he pulled me through, man. And it just shows you that he will provide if you believe, so those things were tough. That was a lot of adversity that I was faced with, that at the same time, I didn't allow it to pull me under, like the tides were strong, but I wouldn't allow it to pull me under, man. Yeah. God was my raft.
Yeah, man. See, that's the humble beast that a lot of people don't get to meet. Most people see you and they don't see that side, but that's what I'm privy to see. And you mentioned going from employee to entrepreneur, and I can see that it was like a light flip on about probably 3-4 years after graduation. When you first, and I had the same thing, new money, you got money for the first time, and I felt like I needed to spend it. I know you say I'm the cheapest person, but I spent more on shoes and fancy bags and cars my first year or so out. And then, it was like, okay, I got this money, but I can spend it. I found out I never thought I could spend this much money in a month, right? And that's when I was like, all right, I got to start saving and investing and doing different things like that. So I saw that same flip of the switch with you. When you first came out, you had every 3 months, I think you had a new car. And then all of a sudden it was like, okay, now I'm about to start saving, investing. And that's when the business piece took off. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So I'm going to be honest with you. I ain't never changed. It ain't changed. I'm still terrible. Last month, I honestly can say was the single-handedly biggest month, the month that I spent the most money in 1 month ever in my life. So I'm not even about to sit here and play like I'm not still a big spender, but I just learned different ways to spend and I learned different ways to invest. So I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad long time ago. And I took some principles and I got into real estate. Right. And I started allowing some of the rental property to generate a revenue that, came up with some of the money that I spent. And then I also read a whole bunch of stuff by Dave Ramsey that taught me different ways as well, as far as like, because Dave, I don't know if you know about Dave, but he's a big spender as well. But at the same time, he doesn't have bills. Right. So he would spend, but he would pay for cash. Right. So my whole thing is, if I purchase something now today, and I can't pay for it cash, one, it's not that I can't afford it, because I never say that, right? can't afford is a negative term that I just basically keep out of my vocabulary. But at the same time, I say it costs too much. If I can't pay for it cash, it costs too much. Yeah, I could probably swipe a card, or I could sign a piece of paper, and I can probably walk away with almost anything I want in the world. But at the same time, if I can't pay for it cash, it costs too much. Then, you're learning from with the investments and stuff that you're doing. The more money you acquire, the less you want to let it go. Right. So then I started asking myself, do I want to spend my cash on this? Right. So it turned from I can't to do I want to? Because something that I can do and something that I want to do is two total different things, right? And now I spend, but I spend on different things. Like I still have nice cars, but I don't need one every 3 months, like you say, which I don't think I have 3 months. But I still have nice cars. I have a nice home, I have a nice condo, and I take lavish trips. So that's my thing now, but that's my happy place, right? That's what I do to relax. That's what I do to kind of break down a week. But I got smarter about it. Right. Like I recently put up a post of a hotel that I stayed in. It was a resort, and someone had sent me a message and was like, man, how much does that room, cost? And I said, well, that room's about $2,500 a night. She like to die on the phone. Right. And I'm like, okay, I didn't pay anything for it. Yeah. And she was like, explain. So I started explaining. I'm like, okay, I have, all these stores and so forth, so on. Everything we purchase, we pretty much put it on American Express. We pay for it at the end of the month so that, we don't pay any interest. So it's just like using our cash, but then we require your points, etc. Those points, all the rewards that I use at the hotels when I call. My personal spend, same. Instead of using a debit card, which allows yourself to have all type of liability, and, you're opening yourself up to fraud. I don't use my debit card at all. I really can leave it at home because I don't have to take out any cash or anything from ATM. So I really don't need it. But same with that. Everything I do on my personal, I put on my personal Delta American Express card. So now I'm building points for everything I do on a day-to-day that I would normally be using my debit card for. It's the exact same, but now I have the security of American Express backing me. And guess what? I get free flights. So now I could pretty much fly because I have a status with Delta that I can buy a regular $300 ticket. They're probably going to upgrade me to a first class $2,500 seat at no charge to myself. I can book my hotels through American Express Travel, and I can pay for, $1,000 room. And when I get to the resort, they're going to say, oh, Dr. Peters, you've been upgraded to the best view in the whole facility at no charge to you. I put up this post on Instagram and everybody's like, oh my God, he's this big spender. No, I got smarter. Right. So I constantly teach people, especially that work for me, about working smarter and not harder. Right. So I'm still living the life that I want to live and doing it probably in a way more lavish manner than most people would without actually spending.
And using passive income, right?
Yeah. And I learned something a long time ago too. Man, Steve was talking about this. It's like the people that could afford everything don't ever pay for anything. Right. And I'm learning that more and more.
Don't pay taxes on anything either.
Oh, no. Don't. That's actually a bad word. Don't even say that word.
Right.
But in addition to that, man, like I said, people who could afford everything don't pay for anything. And then also something that was really, really big that we learned when me and you talked about investments that we went in was, creating companies to own everything, right? The most wealthiest people of the world owns nothing, but controls everything. And that
entities own. People pay taxes, entities don't.
Yeah. And I mean, entities will still pay taxes if you
but not like a worker.
It the correct way, but you got to have your team, get your team of lawyers, get your team of accountants, get your team of, we have tax mitigating strategists in addition to our accountants to just come up with ways for us to take advantages of the tax breaks that's awarded to you. Yeah. A lot of people I read recently, I'm actually on Warren Buffett's book right now, but recently I read a book about Elon Musk. Right. And right now he got a whole lot of controversy because, supposedly he didn't pay taxes last year, et cetera, et cetera. Like, why are you upset for him for taking advantages, the opportunities that was awarded to us? Right. Like those same advantages are awarded to you as well if you take advantage of them. And if you don't know how he did it, instead of hating on him for doing it, you probably should read up on him so you can figure out how you can do it.
Right. So, hey, man, tell me about COVID-19. I know personal impact and then on a business impact as well for your pharmacy. But yeah, tell me COVID-19 with you.
So I heard early in the pandemic that a pandemic comes about and creates the most millionaires out of any economic boom ever,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's tough at first, but there's going to have a lot of people that's going to come out ahead. Pharmacies happen to be one of those areas that I think benefited from COVID-19. While we were down in scripts because people wasn't getting out and about, which means a lot more people wasn't sick, which is a great thing, right? Because this is a business, but at the same time, I'm still a healthcare professional. So ultimately, my goal is to make people get better. Right. Even if it comes at a decrease of finances for me. So that was a great thing. But at the same time, there was so many other things that came about. Some of the government's subsidiaries that they awarded business owners, in addition to us never really have to close our doors because we was considered to be essential, in addition to trying to keep, majority of the staff healthy in the best manner that we can. COVID-19, unfortunately for majority of the people, it was a negative thing. But for the business, we actually have seen a lot of growth due to it. We were on the front lines from day one. Then we were also awarded to be one of the first pharmacies that were we got the vaccine on day one. And was able to start administering it on day one. At the time, the one store that received it was one of the stores in Ascension Parish. And we was only one of the three pharmacies in the entire parish that had the vaccine. So, it happened to be my slowest store. Mm-hmm. Right. Minus the new one. I mean, slowest out of ones that was established. It was a point where we might do 150 prescriptions there a day on average. But when that happened, we might have had 150 people additional walking through the doors every single day to try to acquire this vaccine. When they come in, we put on our smile and our charm and show them what small town pharmacy was about. And we won a lot of those people business for the long term as well. Mm-hmm. Honestly, have been a blessing to be able to take care of people and try to help them get well through this pandemic.
Yeah. So, in the state of Mississippi, it was a lot of large pharmacies, Walgreens, CVS. And I remember the first time I heard about it and I texted you, I was like, I hear that pharmacies are going to be one of the frontline workers with the vaccines. I was like, I think this is going to be huge for you. And you're like, nah. And then, a month later, you're out in the community giving out 300 injections, at a community event.
Yeah. It ended up being huge for us for the biggest reason that I would have never imagined. Mm-hmm. The government paid for it.
Right.
See, everybody was calling me in the beginning, trying to figure out how they could get in and thinking, if we could get stock in the companies that's creating it and so forth, so on. But when the government came in and said that they were paying for it, that kind of eliminated anybody really making anything off of it, right? Mm-hmm. And when we first started giving it from day one, we wasn't getting paid.
Yeah.
So we were giving it as a service.
Mm-hmm.
We were just trying to do a service to the community. We were just trying to give it out to as many people as we could so that we could possibly get back to some sort of normalcy, right? Whatever the new norm is. So in the very beginning, we had no recollection whatsoever that we would get paid for the services that we were yielding, and we were taking on more payroll to actually handle the increased volume. So we were losing money. Mm. But we did it. We did it with our chin up, and we did it with a smile for the simple fact that we were trying to get our community well.
Right.
They came back on the back end and said, hey, yeah, not only is it a free vaccine, but we're going to actually pay the pharmacist an administration fee for administering it. And y'all can back bill all the way to the first one y'all gave.
Right. And that's huge. You jumped in the game without knowing the outcome, right? You did it because of the process.
Yeah, it was one of them situations where you just go with faith, right? Like we didn't even do it for the purpose of a financial benefit. We did it for trying to get past this pandemic. We've all had lost several people that we knew. The first person who died in Ascension Parish that I was aware of was a patient of mine. He walked into the store on a Wednesday. I was notified of his death on Saturday, and this is when it was still in the very beginning. Nobody even was thinking about masks, worried about masks. There wasn't any shutdowns. This was like very, very beginning. But that shook me because I just seen and I just spoke to him. And I possibly would have got close enough to him and probably would have shook his hand and talked to him, which would have put me at risk. If I haven't been, I was sitting in a car on the phone and the conversation was just being a little long-winded. So I ended up just muting it and speaking to him from across the parking lot, and it was more than just a patient as well. Someone that I knew personally. When he moved to this area, he asked me, what church he was going to, and they started going to the church that we went to and so forth and so on. So it was a huge blow to me to where from day one, I took it as a personal initiative that I'm going to do everything within my power to help as many as I can to beat this thing. So when we had the opportunity for the vaccine, I was like, yeah, we give it.
Yeah. So what is the, when you interact with these people giving vaccines, I'm sure they're very appreciative. What's the attitude being around the vaccine?
Oh man, especially in the beginning, right? Like it was so tough to get in the beginning that everybody that got in to actually receive a vaccine was so appreciative, man. It was like one of the most rewarding feelings you can possibly have as a healthcare provider, right? Because this is what we went into this field for.
Mm-hmm.
We like the financial accolades that we get for the services that we provide, but at the same time, it's about the well-being of the patients.
Absolutely.
So to see how people were so appreciative, man, was like the best in the world. And being able to take care of those that were already patients of ours, in addition to bringing in so many new people that didn't even know that we exist. It was just all around like the best feeling in the world. Because I'm gonna be honest with you, I never thought the vaccine would be available so quick, especially when your past president was talking about, the vaccine was going to be available, so forth, so on. I'm like, okay, he's just throwing more out of his, that he usually do. And I basically didn't think it would be possible. Then when it came out, I was like, oh, okay, gotta give credit when credit is due. He said it and they made it happen, so I was happy.
Safe and effective.
And I actually took mine first day. I took mine on and put it on Facebook and put it on Instagram to show people not only am I promoting it, and not only are we administering it, but I also received it. So, just let you know how I feel about it.
Right. Well, E, man, I know you had a long day, so we're going to wrap this up. So, time out with the sports doctor. So this is your final timeout, right? So what piece of information will you give to a young man, young woman who wants to follow in your footsteps, or, just somebody who feels that, hey, I want to be successful in something, but I don't know what it is? What would you leave advice for them?
Man, just know that the sky is the limit, right? Like your only roadblocks are the ones that you create in your mind. Everything starts in your mind, right? Have a positive attitude, surround yourself around positive people, and be ambitious. Be ambitious and don't let anybody tell you no,
Man, I appreciate it. And if you have one book or a quote that you live by, what would that be?
Man, one book, I would say The Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey.
Okay.
Right. That's definitely like a must read for everybody, man. I wish I'd have read it at a much younger age than when I did. And then as far as like a quote, it's just my personal motto, man, which is really not my motto, but at the same time, it's one that a lot of people use, which is try to create a better version of yourself. Every day, work to try to create a better version of yourself.
Well, E, man, it's been an honor and a privilege to have you on here tonight. I appreciate you. And, you gave a lot of insight and a lot of, valid points that a lot of people will be able to take away from this interview. So I really appreciate you. I appreciate you being a brother. Appreciate you being in my life in general. So just thank you, man.
Man, thank you, man. Thank you for having me on. Anytime that I can share, I'm willing and able. I definitely will do.
All right, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you for continuing to support this podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, then please leave a 5-star review. And if you haven't done so, subscribe so you continue to get the updated episodes. Until later, peace.
Hey, time out with the sports doctor. Keep our head right in the game. We ain't never stopping. You are now tuned in. Trust you don't want to miss. This is where life, sports, and medicine